Hi, this is Kevin Lin with Magoosh, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the reading comprehension section on the LSAT. Now, some people think that reading comp is something that you cannot improve, that your reading ability is just something you developed early in your life and can't really change as an adult. But I'm here to tell you that that is just not true. You can make significant gains in reading comprehension if you study it in the right way and focus on the right things. And to that end, I want to give you 5 tips to keep in mind when you're studying for LSAT reading comp. Tip number 1 is make sure to read the passage very, very slowly. And think about each sentence and paragraph after you read each sentence and paragraph. Don't leave the critical thinking for the end of the passage, and don't try to rush through the passage as if your goal is to get to the questions as fast as you can. The reading comp section, like logical reasoning, is testing your understanding of some pretty complicated topics and some pretty complicated sentences. And if you just read as fast as you can, you're not going to understand things to the level that you need to. These passages can be about some pretty obscure topics like neutrinos and theories of justice and legal formalism, things that we're not necessarily accustomed to in our daily reading. And the sentences themselves are often written in a very academic, jargony sort of way, where you just have to break them down in a lot more detail than you might normally break down a newspaper article or a sentence in a novel. So it may be counterintuitive, but the more time you spend on the passage and the less time you spend on the questions, in general, that is going to be the better approach for more students. The better you understand the passage up front, the more confidently and quickly you can answer the questions. So sometimes spending time up front on the passage actually ends up saving you time overall for the passage and questions. So when you're studying for reading comprehension, when you're taking a reading comp section, please put the clock away and try not to think about how long you're taking reading the passage. Read to understand it to the best of your ability. Don't worry how long you're taking, and that's going to produce the best results. The second point I have for reading comprehension is to make sure to keep track of different points of view in the passage. Points of view are the different beliefs or conclusions or hypotheses that are set forth by people or groups in the passage, or perhaps set forth by the author of the passage herself. Your number one job when reading a passage is to understand these points of view and the reasoning and evidence supporting those points of view. So, for example, one passage might involve the point of view that we can never select unbiased jurors, whereas another point of view in the passage is we can select unbiased jurors if we follow these steps. Another passage might not involve a debate, but just a single point of view, the author's point of view that a particular artist and what they did with sheets and colors was very innovative. So when you're reading a passage, your goal is not to memorize every single sentence and the facts they tell you in every sentence, but it's to understand the different points of view and the reasoning that is behind each point of view. On top of that, you should make sure to really understand the author's point of view if it's present. Sometimes a passage is one where the author doesn't agree or disagree with anything and is simply reporting what other people believe. And so there the author is neutral, is not present, don't really have an opinion. But other passages are ones where the author endorses a point of view or actually makes the argument for a particular point of view themselves. And in those passages, you absolutely must understand what the author thinks, both their own view as well as what they think about any other views in the passage. So if you're really struggling with reading comprehension right now, pay more attention to the different beliefs, conclusions, and hypotheses that are set forth in these passages, and I'm sure that your score will start to improve. Tip number 3. Logical reasoning principles are just as important in reading comprehension as they are in logical reasoning. And this comes up in 2 different ways. The first way is that you should keep in mind that the vast majority of reading comprehension questions are just like inference questions in logical reasoning. They are asking you to pick an answer that is supported by evidence from the passage. And so that means that we should be preferring the same kinds of answers as we do in inference questions in logical reasoning, as we do for these inference questions in reading comprehension. That means we should pay much closer attention and be more attracted to answers that are very weakly stated, saying something that's very conservative, that's very easy to prove, something might be possible, something is not always the case. And we want to stay away from extreme answers. They're not necessarily wrong, but they should be a red flag. So answers that say something is always the case or something is required. These strong types of answers are just inherently harder to prove, and so that means we should be a little bit more skeptical of them in inference questions in reading comprehension. Now, the second big way that logical reasoning principles come into play in reading comp is argument structure. Remember how in logical reasoning, we have to pay close attention to what is a premise, what is a conclusion, are there any assumptions being made in the jump from the premise to the conclusion? Believe it or not, these principles are strictly in play in reading comprehension as well, because a lot of passages involve arguments, they involve support, they involve conclusions, they involve assumptions. And it can absolutely matter whether the author disagrees with someone's conclusion or whether they disagree with someone's evidence. Some reading comp questions are asking us to strengthen or weaken the positions of different parties in the passage, and those should be handled just like logical reasoning strengthen and weaken questions, where we identify the conclusion, the reasoning, and think about the assumptions that are underlying that reasoning. My next tip is to stop lingering on tough questions. Reading comprehension is not like logic games where you can actually just definitively prove logically that an answer is correct and the other 4 answers are wrong. There are some tough questions in reading comp where there's gonna be a judgment call and there's no way that spending an extra 2 minutes just thinking about the different answers is productive. When people are so concerned about timing in reading comprehension, a lot of times they misplace their focus on how much time they take to read the passage, when really the issue is how much time they are wasting on questions that they have already made a decision on and are not being productive anymore, or on questions that they just can't figure out because they have a misinterpretation, and the extra time spent debating between answers is just not helping. There was a recent test where the right answer to one of the questions involved a very, very obscure line reference at the very beginning of the passage that no one in their right mind would actually remember. The right move would have been to eliminate what you can eliminate, to pick something and move on. The wrong move would have been to spend 2.5 minutes hunting for support for an answer choice. Sure, maybe you end up getting that question correct, but you end up shooting yourself in the foot because you are now not having enough time for the harder passages later in the section. So if you're currently struggling to finish a reading comp section in 35 minutes, I would suggest taking more time to read the passage, but saving time on the questions. You still want to read the answer choices carefully, you still want to think about the questions carefully, but if you know it, you know it. And if after you read the answer choices twice and you're still stumped, don't spend 2 minutes more trying to find the right answer. Pick something using your gut, use process of elimination, and then move on. That is generally going to be the better approach for you. My final tip for reading comprehension relates to review. When you're reviewing, cover up each paragraph after you read it and take time to summarize each paragraph in 1 sentence. This is the exact skill that you're going to be using when you're actually doing reading comprehension in a time situation, but surprisingly, a lot of students don't actually practice that skill when they're reviewing. In fact, many students completely or mostly neglect reviewing reading comprehension passages. They'll just look at the questions they got wrong, they'll see the right answer, and they'll see if they can find the line that supports the right answer. While you do need to do that, you also need to practice the actual reading of the passage. So that's why I think the most helpful exercise when it comes to practicing reading is to cover up the paragraphs after you read them and see if you can summarize the important points in a single short sentence. The more that you practice that, the more that you're going to be able to actually do that in a time situation, and the more that you'll actually be able to retain the big points that you read. So those were 5 pointers on studying for and taking the reading comprehension section on the LSAT. Keep in mind that although reading comp may be something that is a little bit harder to improve than the other sections, may take a little bit more time than the other sections, you can make significant gains in this section if you study in the right way. Now, before you go, make sure to leave a comment below if you have any questions about my reading comprehension advice, and like and subscribe to Magoosh's LSAT channel for notifications on other videos.